Welcome to the Mama Stay Fit podcast. In today's episode, Tammy's going to be sharing her 2 birth stories from the early 2000s, and she's going to discuss how birth is really different now than it was back then when she first gave birth, and how her births have really influenced her as a birth doula now. Welcome to the Mama Stay Fit podcast. This is Gina, perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula.
And this is Roxanne, labor and delivery nurse and student midwife.
And this is the Mama Stay Fit podcast, where we empower you on your prenatal fitness, birth, and postpartum return to fitness journey.
Our podcast shares how to move throughout your pregnancy to stay strong and comfortable. Pain is not a requirement of pregnancy. Understand the science of birth and how to approach recovery after birth.
We share our personal experiences as mothers navigating the stage of lives, plus our professional expertise as birth workers and fitness professionals.
Our goal is to help you feel confident as you navigate the perinatal timeframe for an empowering pregnancy, positive birth, and postpartum journey.
We are glad to have you with us on this journey and that you've chosen us to support you. Welcome to the Mama Stay Fit podcast. Today we have Tammy here, who's going to be sharing her birth stories from however long ago, and then how her births have influenced her as a birth doula now. So Tammy, can you introduce yourselves to our listeners?
My name is Tammy Ireland. I'm in Denver, Colorado. I am mom to 2 kids, Ian, who will be 20 next month, and my daughter, Macy, who will be 17 in September. I have an undergrad in bio, really thinking I would go pre-med to do birth work in a much different space than I do now. I ended up meeting my husband from Scotland and becoming a mom and nanny so I could be at home with my kids, and found myself dueling professionally right in the middle of COVID.
Well, that is really exciting to start doula work in the middle of COVID when I know there was a lot of hospital restrictions. It was probably a really steep learning curve as well. So let's jump into it. How were your pregnancies with your 2 kids?
So I come from an incredibly huge family. My mom and dad are both one of 7 kids. I have over 20 cousins on one side. I was one of the oldest girls, so birth was not scary to me. I witnessed my aunties going into labor quite often. And to me, growing up, I couldn't wait to be pregnant. I couldn't wait to be a mom. And then I became pregnant myself. My first pregnancy was awful. I was hospitalized twice to get fluids because I was so sick. And you could dive into that condition if you'd like and explain that further. Nutrition became huge. I was very fit. I lost a lot of weight before I wanted to get pregnant. So I actually ran a marathon 6 months before getting pregnant with my first and lost like 30 pounds. It started me on my fitness journey. So I was very excited to be pregnant. That was probably the only bad thing about being pregnant, was waking up and puking every morning and every afternoon. But I kept nannying while I was doing it. So I was taking care of 3 other kids while I was pregnant. It's interesting because now I see my moms who are multips and I'm like, this is a good distraction. I think it was so beneficial to be busy. I didn't have an excuse to just sit around and be sick, basically. You know, I was helping take care of other kids. So overall, normal pregnancy, my water broke the day before my due date. I was in the middle of Home Depot with my nieces. We had just moved my grandma into a house. The whole family was at my grandma's house, painting, getting the house ready. And it was really like a Laura Ingalls novel. So like the whole fam's there. I take my nieces up. I'm carrying paint cans, and my niece Brooke goes, "I think you peed." And I was like, yes, I did. But I was calm. I remember being excited, but knowing that it wasn't an emergency. I had seen a couple of my aunts where that had happened, and one of my aunts ended up giving birth at home. So there was never this fear. Always strange. Whereas my peers, they were like panicked. And actually, my husband was working for the MLS at that time. And the night before, one of the players' wives, I was sitting in the stands with her. We had the same doctor, same OB, and her water broke. And she panicked. And I basically doulaed her. Like I was like, you have time. Just let them know that happened. Go home, like make sure you're ready. But you don't have to go in right away. Like I remember saying that to her. And then the next day it happens to me, and we go to the house. I'm like, John, I think it's time. Like the whole family's like, oh my God, actually I'm good. Like we're fine. Like stay calm, go home, get the bag, go to the hospital.
So before we jump into your birth, why did you feel so confident about birth? Just from watching your aunts give birth, or had you done any sort of childbirth education prior to this?
So I made my husband take. I made him take the childbirth class with me, and he was so good. And he was such a good partner. But I think it was PNA. But my confidence, I think, genuinely stemmed from being from a big family, doing my education, like the bio and like deep diving. I mean, I graduated college in 96. There was no email. There was no Google. There was no YouTube. I would check out VCR tapes from the library. And before I had kids, because I was like, I just think witnessing that at a young age, like I was 12, and seeing it, like my other cousin, who is now actually a nurse anesthetist, she was like, I'm never having sex. And I was like, this is incredible. Look what our body did. And I just remember always being obsessed with it. And then it was me, and I just was like, I couldn't wait to see what my body would do. Because you don't know. And I think that's where the confidence came from, because I had seen it in so many different women. I knew from the get-go that it was going to be mine, that it might do this or it might do that. And I think that being, I was old at 29, and knowing that they did come out on the other end, and my mom did it, and my grandma did it, and my aunt did it, and her mom did it. And having that really it took away the fear.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's dive into your first birth story then. How did it go?
Yeah. And then we went to the hospital. Just kidding. Just kidding. Not that that's a bad thing. That also didn't scare me, because I was like educated in birth and birth practices. The one thing that was missing is, like, for as much as I knew being in that space, I flipped my mindset to being told what to do. And I think trusting them to be like, you do this now, or I placed too much trust in them, and should have been educated more on what that looked like for me personally. So, for example, my water broke at like 2:00. We went home. They said to come in around 6. I didn't eat because I was so excited. And I remember, I totally remember this, because I remember there was like this restaurant I really liked on the way to the hospital. And I remember my husband asking me, should we stop and eat? And I was like, oh, no, they'll have food there. Dumb. So dumb. Like major regret. And one of the
That's really wishful thinking.
They do have food there.
Not for you, though.
Can't eat it.
Exactly. So we get there, we get checked in, all the things, poked, prodded, and it's like, okay, your water broke, but you're only at 1 centimeter and 80% effaced. And, just go walk around for a while. Okay. Mom and dad comes, right? Like, we should have charged, I tell John, we should have charged admission for every person that came from the time I checked in. Ian's college would be paid for right now, literally, right? Because everyone's local. My whole family's here. So I was like walking around, and I back up to pictures, right? Because I am obsessed with photos, and I actually am doing Birth Becomes You photography class for birth photography, because I have a handful. I maybe have 12 photos of that experience, which kills me. Even in thinking about talking to him, like, I want to go look. I can't go look. Like, it's crazy. I have a picture. My husband is also an exercise physiologist / performance coach, athletic performance coach. God, he'd kill me. Sports scientist. That's what he'd tell. So he was like, you need to squat. And the one picture I had, like, in my birth gown, and I'm like, and I'm squatting on the wall, and it was just waiting. And then the nurses were like, you should eat something. And I will never eat dill to this day, because who orders a tuna sandwich anyway? So tuna sandwich is way too much dill. Didn't really eat. Keep in mind, I've been puking my whole pregnancy. So this is just like, I'm good. And then I remember the nurses just being like, you need to rest. You just need to sleep. Everything will be fine. Okay. So 1 a.m. comes, and I'm definitely starting contractions, and I'm definitely uncomfortable. And in my mind, some women in my family had epidural, some didn't. They all told me, you have to get it right away, because if you don't get it. There'll be a time, that this 20 years ago, it was like, You're not going to be able to get it. If you don't get it before you're 3 centimeters, you're not going to be able to get it. I remember them like that was instilled in my brain. So the minute I started to feel that borderline uncomfortable, I was like, John's like, can you do this? And I was like, I can do. He's like, you ran a marathon. You can do hard things. So I had that. And yet the nurse came in and was like, hey, the anesthesiologist is here. They want to talk to you about the epidural, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. And then at 3, probably 3:34, no, about 3 a.m. I was like, this hurts. And I felt like, you can say I felt pressured to do it, that it was going to be the only window I could do it. And I did it. They're like, you'll sleep better. Like you've been up all day and your water's been broke for this long. And like, we don't want baby to get an infection. And that was my biggest regret, was getting it. Not because it was epidural. I just feel like the minute that happened, my whole mindset shifted to now I'm going to do whatever they say. And I'm in the bed and I haven't eaten. I remember thinking through all this, right? My husband's asleep. My mom was there. My dad floated in and out. So fast forward, I get the epidural, catheter. They give me popsicles. They're like, are you hungry? I'm starving. Great popsicles. And I'm like, fine, I'll have great popsicles. This will come back later. And literally will come back later. And they didn't move me. I remember laying there and thinking, this is so wrong. And I remembered one of my aunts she had 3 other kids. And literally, I think we were in the backyard. And she went to the hospital and that baby was there an hour later. We didn't stop during the day. And then, so all these things are playing out in my head and we weren't moving. And intuitively, I was like, I need to move. Like, I remember waking John up and being like, can you please move me? Like, I'm losing my mind here. But they put me on the side. So they didn't not move me completely, but like they put me on the side. There's no peanut balls. There's no birth stools. There's nothing, nothing, pillows. They were like, you can put a pillow between your knees. And then they put a pillow under my hip. They never sat me up. I never actually sat up. I remember sitting up myself when no one was in there because I was eating another popsicle that felt good. And I remember thinking this feels good. But then the nurse came in and was like, hey, you need to lay down, And then we talked about when the doctor's going to come. They did a cervical at the epidural. And I still, there was not any change. I think it was 2 centimeters. The doctor came in the morning and my regular doctor wasn't there. So that was also a gut punch. Dr. Gore, he was unavailable. So I'd never met this other doctor. This was back when you had one doctor and it wasn't a practice. There wasn't 4 in the practice. And every time I went, that was kind of nice. Every time I went to my meeting, I had the same doctor. He came in the morning and I was only 4 centimeters. I say only. In my head, it was I thought it'd be so much more because I had rested. I did everything they said. And they started Pitocin. They started Pitocin before that. I know that now from what I've deep dived in other notes I had taken. But at the time, I don't remember talking about it. I don't remember them explaining that to me. I remember them telling me, your contractions have spread out. We just want to get things going. But it was never explained to me like I hear it explained to my clients now. And that's okay. I don't fault them for that. I always say I love doctors. I love nurses. I don't fault them for what they're trained to do. I don't know that they were trained to do that. I have no idea. But I know that it was not fully explained to me. Doctor did the rounds. I didn't like the doctor. He was very abrasive. And I'm very dramatic. You'll just learn that about me. Mad Men comes to mind, misogynistic / he never looked at me when he was talking. He looked at my husband, which was so crazy to me. And he would talk to the nurses. And I remember saying, hello. I remember looking at the doctor and being like, so what do I do? What are we going to do? And he's like, we're just going to wait. I'll be back around lunchtime. The nurses got you and have a great day. And I'm like, I just remember and then I lost it. And then I just cried and cried because I was like, oh my gosh, everyone can have a baby but me. Everyone is so good at this in my family. It flipped. All that confidence that I'd seen my whole family do was but I'm the black sheep and I'm going to be the one that gets the C-section. And that is the first time that entered my head because I knew what that was. And I knew that was extreme. an extreme plan Z, right? But it still was there in my head. And I was very, very afraid of a C-section because the only person I knew at that time that had had a C-section, it did not end well. So that was the only thing I was afraid of in birth. The only thing that I was just fearful of. Also, I don't think I was educated enough about it, right? Like I know now, knowing I've been in the OR multiple times with my clients and I love it. It's amazing. Like it literally saved my client's life, So I was very fearful of that. One of the nurses, I think her name was Patricia, came in and she was new. She was young. And I remember her sitting by my bedside and being like, you need to just let your body relax. Let your mind relax. Like, she was more of a doula than anyone in that, space. One of my friends, Ellie, came in and she was super supportive. My mom, of course, was supportive. And I remember her playing with my hair and then I just slept. But my biggest memory is just this time suck of just being idle and miserable. And it really, that messed with my head big time. And then when the doctor finally came back around lunchtime, I was still like 5, 6, and they were telling me baby was low, but it was sunny side up. I never heard the term OP or like, they were just like, we think the baby's OP or sunny side up. Do you know what that means? And I'm like, yes, because a lot of my aunts had babies that were sunny side up. And it was like a joke. We'd be like, hey, Brandon, come here, But then it became this negative, like that's dangerous. And we don't, you're not progressing. All these things you're doing is just like, the doctor's like, well, how long do you want to wait? I'm like, what? Like, as in, what's the alternative? Like, not have a baby? It just was so bizarre to me. And then he finally was like, well, I'm going to come back in a couple hours. And if there's nothing, like, we're going to go to C-section. And he said it exactly like that. It was threatening to me. Like, if your body doesn't do what it's supposed to do, I'm sorry. He also came in and like washed his hands and was like, all right, how's it going? I mean, just so like, why are you a doctor in the OB field? But I've yet to meet a doctor like him with any of my clients. Any. He retired the year after that, by the way. But I just felt threatened. I felt like I didn't have anyone helping. I felt lost. I felt defeated. I felt like my body wasn't doing what it was supposed to. The minute he was like, okay, I'm going to come back in a couple hours or C-section, bottom line. Like, we're not going to try pushing. We're not going to, like, if you're not complete, we're just going to. And I'm like, what? Like, what I didn't know, and then I know now, looking, I probably had bloody shore. I probably had fluid leaking that presented meconium. I know that for sure because when Ian was finally born, but everybody left the minute he said that. My mom left the room, John left the room, and I was laying in there by myself. We talk about this now. I was like, why did you leave me? I didn't know. They literally went out. We're Christian. My mom went out to pray with my dad. My husband went downstairs, went to find the chapel, and he went and prayed. And I was laying there. Well, Patricia came back in and she said, honey, you can do this. You can do this. And she sat me up, right? So she sat me up in the bed and she held my hand. And she put my feet up. So what I'd call thrown now is what she did to me. And she's like, got me tissues because I was like sobbing uncontrollably. And I was like, I'm going to have a C-section. I'm so afraid. And no. She's like, if that happens, we will support you. And you're going to have a healthy, happy baby. Either way this baby comes out or decides to be born, you're going to go home with a baby and it's going to be okay. So she was super supportive. And then she's like, you're going to sit up. And then I'm going to come in and we're going to lay on our side. And she started moving me. So for the next every 20, 30 minutes, that nurse was moving me, right? To the side, sitting up. And I did that, what I call a rotisserie chicken, right? Without peanut balls, with everything. Doctor comes back in and he's such a jerk. I can't say enough bad things about him. Not everything. Comes in, washes his hands and is like, all right. And he was going to do a cervical check. And Patricia was holding my hand and she's like, things are different. You're doing amazing. You're going to see a change. And she was so positive. And he like put on his gloves and was like, all right, knees up, just relax. And he was like, and I remember his face, right? Masked up. And I remember his eyes like this. And he looked at the nurse and she goes, I told you. Like this. And she was pissed. Like, And it's funny looking at that story now from what I do now. And he was panicked. Ian was crowning. And he was like, all right. And he like got up and all the things under my butt. And I pushed for 20 minutes. And Ian was born, which is crazy. And he was born around 6:30, just before 7 p.m. But when he came out, he was limp and he didn't cry. They put him up like this, like about like this to me. I didn't get skin to skin. They took him directly over to the warmer. They like suction. He had so much food. There was so much meconium. I remember that being panic. I remember feeling panic that the staff, they were nervous. Like I remember this overall feeling of he's not okay. And it seems like years when that happens. It was probably minutes. But to me, laying there, and of course, John went over to him and I'm laying there and he's doing his thing. The doctor didn't talk to me. Hey, Mom, you're doing okay. The baby's great. Nobody was talking to me. Nobody was saying anything. And I really thought he was not okay. Right. Finally, I hear him cry. And that nurse came back over and said, you have a beautiful baby boy. We also didn't find out what we were having. It was a surprise. And they didn't even say like, it's a boy. I just remember it being panic, a sudden panic and like 20 people in the room. And now, again, looking back to what I know now, I'm sure. And there was massive meconium and they sat forever. I remember hearing and thinking, I remember looking and seeing that and thinking, oh, my baby's dying. Like I really thought he was dying. So not a great first experience. It seemed like forever for them to bring him back to me. And they bathed him. They had completely bathed him by that time. I mean, it just blows my mind knowing what I know now. Like John didn't get the cord, no delayed cord clamping, no skin to skin, no communication. When they finally did bring him back to me, they put him on me and I knew I wanted to breastfeed. I'd seen all my, that was probably like I was like, I can't wait. I still miss that. It's probably the one thing I miss the most. And for real, and put him on me. And I remember him latching on and the nurse saying to me, Ian, Dwayne, we're going to take you down the hall to teach all the other kids how to do this. And so if you want to choose something to be good out, he chose well. Right. But yeah, that was my first birth story. That was not great. It is literally why I am so compassionate, empathetic towards other mommies at whatever phase they're in motherhood, whether that's birth, postpartum, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds. I charge time and a half. I was so sympathetic because it was that bad. I was like, it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah.
That's how my first birth was for me too, where now when I see the same thing happening with others, like I just feel for them so much more. Cause I'm like, I know.
Oh my God.
I know what you're going through right now. Like for me, it was right after I paved and I got the epidural. It was not my plan, but I was just not feeling supported at all during my birth. I'm like, obviously like Roxanne and my husband and my mom are all very supportive, but like
Gina's like,
right.
My whole birth team, everyone fails me. Roxanne sucks. My husband sucks.
But I remember like after I got my epidural, after my like complete meltdown, laying in the bed, just feeling like so defeated. Like,
yeah,
wow, everyone who like doubted me is right. To like the midwife who hates me is right.
Yeah.
And the new midwife came in and she was wonderful. But she was like, oh, we are almost 10 centimeters. You may just break your water. And at that point, I just felt so defeated. Like I was like, just do whatever you want, I guess. Like I don't feel like I have a say in my birth and what's happening anymore. Like,
right.
Just, I guess, whatever. And so like when I was listening to your story, I was like, I feel a lot of the things that you are sharing. And I could see how it influenced your birth or your birth work.
It definitely influenced everything I do. I think from just being sympathetic, empathetic to education to the point where even in my clients are in that space and I'm so thankful. I can't say a doctor has ever been threatening. Only once I've really experienced that. I always say to my kids, being sympathetic and empathetic are completely different. Like when I've experienced it, I can completely empathize with you because I've been there. But having the sympathy is not going to hurt either. So I know that it was definitely, yeah.
Absolutely. So do you want to share your second birth story? Was it any different from your first, or was it about the same?
No, completely different. And what's really interesting, my second pregnancy was very different. So 3 years later, they're 3 years apart, almost exactly. I had a very hard time getting pregnant and ended up using acupuncture because a friend had suggested that. And that was in 2006. That was like unheard of. She's now one of my best friends. Her name's Jen Wright. And found her, which played back later because with Macy, they told me that I had placenta previa initially. Okay, what's that? We can deep dive into placenta previa. And they're like, pretty much going to guarantee a C-section if this doesn't change, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, here we go again. It definitely changed, I think because of acupuncture, but who knows? Or I needed a second opinion. And then they're like, oh, your fluid's too low and telling me all these things. And then she was breech. So she presented breech at 36 weeks. I'm still going to acupuncture. And Jen says, I can help with that. And I'm like, I will let you. So she did moxibustion at 38 weeks pregnant. And they offered the ECV, which you could deep dive into either of those procedures with this, like ECV or moxibustion. And at 38 weeks, we did moxibustion. If you're not familiar, I can explain it. But she flipped. And I went back to the doctor for the appointment for the ECV, and they did the ultrasound, and she had turned. I knew she turned because at 38 weeks, that it was painful. And it looked like an alien movie when she did it, right? And she stayed. And so I actually was like, they kept offering induction and I declined. I ended up being 41 plus 6 and finally scheduled an induction because I was like, okay, fine. And we went in at like 7 a.m. They broke my waters and she was born at 2:10. But what I really remember about the whole experience is that I wasn't upset. I wasn't afraid. I knew she was head down. We also didn't find out what we were having, but I knew it was a girl. In my heart, I knew it was a girl. It was a student midwife because I was at a different hospital. She's like, I would like to try this thing. It's called a perineum massage. I would just like to try it because that's part of I was like, do whatever. I don't care. And I was like, I remember thinking, and we joke about it. My husband can make all kinds of Scottish jokes about that. But it was just like, you're going to do what? Okay, great, fine. I pushed for a half hour. But again, no skin to skin. They did not bring her right to me. They washed. All I remember was crowning them saying, oh, there's so much hair. There's so much hair. It was definitely different, completely different experience. Calm atmosphere. I think the first was so bad that this one was just like, she's head down. If it happens, great, whatever. I have a 3-year-old at home that needs me. It was hard leaving him, my mind was just in a completely different place. I was very open to kind of anything and everything. I was like, oh, I thought I was before. No. It schooled me to be like, okay, whatever happens. But at a different hospital, different provider made a huge difference. But all those newborn procedures that I think, especially in Colorado, I told my moms, you have no idea how good you have it now. Even delayed cord clamping, asking the dad if he wants to cut the cord, not bathing the baby for a while, all those things, getting latched on, letting mom just sit with baby for the golden hour. That was a first. And now we just expect that. Now that's just standard, right? Baby first, mom first. I didn't have either of that with either of my kids. And that makes me angry,
So how has your births influenced your birth work in a positive way? Because just based on hearing your 2 stories, I can already tell how much it has influenced the way that you approach supporting birth.
Yeah, I think the most positive way it affects my birth work is that I pride myself in being a very good listener. And really, no matter what the mom is saying, I joke with my clients. I'm like, if you tell me you want me to say those sky is purple and blow bubbles in your face while you're laboring, I will do that for you. And also, if you tell me my mom's, I can't, if I, my grandma says, if I had $1 for every time a mom is birthing and I tell her, my most recent client, I was like, Jenny, I believe you. I trust you. This monitor can tell me X, Y, Z, but I'm looking at you. I'm looking at your body language. I'm listening to your voice. It's the whole package. Like, you guys do a really great job of that in one of your most recent blogs about, the 5 things to look for. Like, it's not just a monitor. It's not just the heartbeat. It's all of it. And the relationship. Like, I think I'm very, because of what I went through, it affects me so positively in encouraging moms to really believe yourself, trust yourself, because you do know. And it's so sad that we just don't trust ourselves enough. And if I say that over and over, my daughter's 16, and I say it to her, I believe you. Sometimes you just need someone to be like, if somebody would have come to me and been like, you seem really upset right now. What can I do for you? I was like, I'm laying here. Like, I've been laying here forever. This does not feel good. Something's wrong. I feel like something's wrong. And if somebody would have just said, Tammy, we believe you. What can we do? Let's do something different. It would have changed the whole trajectory of my first birth.
Absolutely. I think a big part of birth work is acknowledging that you may have more experience as the birth doula, the labor nurse, the medical provider with birth as a whole. So
right.
You have that expertise that you're bringing to the table and that experience to give your recommendation based on that. But the person that knows best about that individual birth is the person that is giving birth. And I think that's a big part that's sometimes hard as the professional to recognize is that yes,
right.
You know a lot of stuff.
Right.
Our providers know a lot. The nurses know a ton. The doulas, everyone that's there to support you
right.
knows so much about birth. But we don't know the best for your individual birth experience.
Yes.
Because you're going to sense things in your body. You're going to intuitively feel that something is going well or maybe a little bit off. Just like for you in your first birth, you're like, I need to sit up. Like, this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
And I see that constantly with my clients. Like, I can provide my expertise on what I know as a whole, but like you're going to know what's best. And so I'm going to follow your cues. Like if you're moving in a certain way, I'm going to enhance the movement in that way. And that's a huge thing that we harp on in the birth worker course where we're like, hey, we're giving you all these tools. Yeah. It doesn't mean you need to use every single one because you'll see that a lot too. Someone took a spinning babies class and they're like, I'm going to do the 3 sisters and the 85 other moves for spinning babies on every single client. And it's like,
doesn't work on every single client.
And I'm like, hey, like, I got it. Like you took this class. I'm really excited for you. I think that's awesome that you educated yourself.
Yeah.
However, we have to know when to apply those tools, not just apply it to every situation. So that's sometimes a hard thing with like new birth workers, especially who are very passionate. It's like, hey, I got it. Sideline release. It's the magic move.
Yeah.
It's not the magic move right now. Let me explain why.
Yeah, and that's why I love my group. So I work with intuitive birth doulas run by Mary Anderson. Misty Stewart is another colleague of mine, and we were just talking about that today. And Lauren, when she was at a birth, just a doozy all night, and we were just saying how that is the hardest. Our job is wild. Like you never know, but you will always find your North Star if you start with the client and talk to them and really, truly believe them. And sometimes, like, one of my clients, she did not present like your typical transition. But what she said to me is like, we were trying to move her into a position and it took her forever. And she just was like, my body can't do that. Well, that was her transition moment of I can't. Technically, it wasn't like I can't, but I think you might be closer to complete than you think. And sure enough, she was. It looks different for everybody, but you're absolutely right. When you said I'm going to do all the 3 spinning birthdays, Mary Anderson, I remember the first training and we apprentice each other. So we'll shadow each other during births. And I remember the first one I went to was just for a rookie during COVID. So all the restrictions, face masks, and going in and you're not allowed to leave because you can't like come in and back. It was crazy, but I remember I love how she was like, she said that. And I remember her saying that to the client and being like, I believe you. You are safe and your baby is safe. I need you to tell me more. Tell me more about that. Whatever you're feeling, tell me more about that.
No, I think that that's so important because even like birth workers, like doulas, like obviously I'm not like a doula where I'm there all the time in the room supporting birth, but it is like so important that we as like nurses and providers are not just relying on the monitors too, because like the monitor tells you one thing, but you have to go into the room and actually like talk to the patient and like hear what they're feeling because like that's only one piece of the puzzle for like you as a healthcare provider.
Right.
And like just listening to your birth stories, it's like, I mean, it's like 16 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's so crazy that even that birth has changed so much.
Yeah.
In 20 to 16 years where like skin to skin was not a thing. Like people just didn't do it.
Yes.
They didn't do delay cord clamping. They didn't bathe babies immediately because they were quote unquote dirty. But like the crazy part is that what we do now is not even that new. Like, or I mean, not that like old either, because like skin to skin is still like fairly new. And even in some hospitals, like it's still like,
right.
Oh, hey, here's your baby 45 minutes after you gave birth. So it's like, just shows how long it takes healthcare to change. Not to be like negative about it.
Yes.
But it is changing. And so like, it does give you like hope that like, 16 years ago, things are pretty drastically different in most hospitals. And like birth has just changed so much. So like, what will it look like in 20?
Yeah. Well, I think now patients and clients are so much more educated because of things like social media. Like, think about how much information we could put out on our Instagram, like to, 200,000 people.
Yeah.
That was never available before. Like you said, like you had to go rent a video from the library to even learn about like childbirth education. But now someone can.
I'm so old, you guys.
Someone, you don't look that old. I thought you were our age. I'm like, there's no way.
I wanted to say too, before I forget, that I love this part about it because I am older and I think I'm the oldest in our group, but I love what you said as far as when we believe the mom and even though you have the healthcare, you have all these things, really paying attention to the mom and encouraging them to trust themselves. I always tell my clients, it translates. It's completely analogous to being a mother. And I tell them, I said, there'll be moments when you're mothering and you will be like, I don't know. And I'm telling you at that moment, you do. I guarantee you, if you think your kid's getting sick before a trip, guess what? They're getting sick like 100% of the time. And trusting yourself on that. And I think it's the motherhood or mamahood. I love how they always say, listen to everyone, but do what you want. Because the social media aspect, again, I love hate, major love-hate relationship. So informative, but the FOMO and comparing yourself or, having to tell someone you can't compare your baby's milestones because there's this huge broad scope of what is normal. And right now, like this mom I saw today, and she's looking at her friends and she's, comparing, well, that baby did this. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not your baby.
Yeah.
And it's the same. That's not your birth. So trusting yourself because it completely is analogous to when you're on the other side and you're a mom. Completely.
Absolutely. I definitely think it's important to have a medical team and people on your birth team that you truly trust as well, because it's not realistic to be able to research everything about your birth. You can't know how to do a C-section on yourself or what like the risks and benefits of every like birth intervention are. Like we have to be able to reasonably rely on our providers and our medical team and our birth team to help us navigate our birth situation.
Yep.
We need to trust ourselves and our intuition and what our gut is telling us. Sometimes it's really hard because we have people that are kind of trying to hold your hand your entire pregnancy. You can't eat this. You can't do that. Like, how dare you not listen to, you have to ask your provider before you even like drink a tea.
Yeah.
It's really important that we, choose a team that we can truly trust to help us navigate different situations within our birth.
Yeah.
That we trust ourselves. And just like you're saying, like that, continuing to trust ourselves is really going to resonate throughout our births, through our motherhood experience. And like Roxanne was saying, like we can't just rely on one tool to tell us what's happening in a birth. Like just watching the monitor is not always the full picture. I don't know how many times I've been supporting a birth where the medical team comes running in because of the monitor. And I'm like, hey guys, I think she's going to start pushing soon. I think that's what the monitor is telling us because I'm watching her grunt and they're like, okay, well, call us when you need us. And they leave. And I'm like, come back.
Yeah.
Call button. Hello, I need you. I need you.
I know.
And they're like, oh, well, the monitors. I'm like,
yeah.
But the baby head is what's letting me know that maybe I need you in here.
I sense some hair. I think you need
I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah.
Don't just look at the monitors. Like there's so many subtle clues of birth too that have been really cool to witness as a doula that I love educating our clients and our students on of like, hey, these are the things to look for.
Yeah, that when it goes from the to the and I'm like,
Yeah. Or someone's like sitting sideways in their their chair. I'm like, I think there's a baby head there. And that's why you can't sit down.
God.
I don't need a monitor to tell me that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God.
Well, thank you so much, Tammy, for coming on our podcast and sharing your birth story, even though you do not look a day over 30. Apparently, you are a very young teenage mom, is what I'm telling myself. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast to share your birth story, and then also how your stories have really impacted you as a birth doula now. And thank you for your time today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, you guys. I love it. Thank you for what you do. It's vital to my job. I love it. I consider you part of my support team.
Well, we are happy to be a part of that.
Thank you for trusting us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today and listening to this episode. If you want more support throughout your pregnancy, join our prenatal fitness programs and childbirth education course. If you need more support after birth, join our postpartum fitness programs and education courses. If you're a professional, we offer birth worker and fitness trainer courses so you can learn from us and earn CEUs. Explore all of our courses on our website at mamastayfit.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow our podcast to be notified when we release new episodes, leave a review, and share with your friends. We release new episodes every Wednesday and new birth stories every Friday.